Hey, hello, and welcome to this episode of Learn Everyday English, your roadway to English proficiency. Well, we have a special guest in this studio today, but before I get into that, there's 3 things that you can do for me. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and 3, tell your friends about it so that they can benefit from these videos too, just like you. Okay, as you can see, we have a special person with me today, and my wife, Rosa. So I'm going to interview her, and she has a background and wealth of experience. I think that can benefit you and help you on your English language journey. And I have some questions here I'm going to ask her, and we'll just get into that and kind of play it by ear and see where it leads, okay? So Rosa, can you introduce yourself to us? Tell us who you are and what do you do, or what did you do, as a career?
Okay, so hello to everyone out there in Everyday English. Good luck to you. I hope you are learning a whole lot, as I have been, as I've been studying Italian as well. So who am I? I'm your wife. Mm-hmm. And I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for a long time. I'm a professor currently. I'm a professor at the university, teaching teachers how to become teachers. But initially I was an elementary teacher, bilingual teacher. So my focus was helping our students not only learn the curriculum, but also learn the English language. And so that's who I am.
You were a teacher, but you also were a vice principal?
Oh, yes.
At a pre-K?
Yes. Yes, I was a principal for 11 years at an elementary school, and then I retired as a principal at a pre-K school.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And here, pre-K is, K means kindergarten, so pre-K is pre-kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So what are the ages of the kids that go to pre-K here in the U.S.?
Well, it's a little bit complicated, but for pre-K, you're typically developing children that would be from age 4 till age 5.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And the reason I asked that, because I was talking with a friend in Colombia as a language exchange, and he has a 3-year-old son. Mm-hmm. And he said his 3-year-old son could start going to school, and I told him, well, here I think it's 4 is the earliest age usually that young kids can start going to school. So
well, here, if a child has been diagnosed with a disability, they can start going to school at age 3.
Okay.
But if not, then not till you're 4.
4, okay. All right, and I guess we're going to talk about your time growing up and your language learning when you were a youngster, as we say here in the United States, or a kid. But you grew up in a very interesting part of the state here of Texas. You want to tell us about that? Okay.
So I grew up in a rural community in West Texas. My native language is Spanish. Mom and Dad spoke Spanish, and so my first language was Spanish. I did not learn how to speak English till I started school. Therefore, it was difficult. My first year in school was very difficult. But I am very grateful to my mom and my dad because they instilled in us the importance of speaking our native language, which was Spanish, right? And not everyone was given that opportunity and taught to value our native language, but we were. And so as a result, all of us, because there were 6 of us, now there's 5 of us, siblings, we all can speak Spanish fairly well, despite the fact that our careers has not required us to speak Spanish, but we still, all of us speak Spanish.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where are your parents from?
My mom and dad were from Mexico.
Okay. But I know Spanish has helped you out or been beneficial for you as a principal, having to deal with families, Spanish-speaking families, right?
Right. And specifically because we live in Texas. And so a lot of people speak Spanish here in the United States, right? So I became a teacher because I love teaching. But I became a bilingual teacher because I wanted to be able to help our students, our Spanish-speaking students, help them through the process, because I remember what I went through, trying to learn English, and then also feeling that sense that that language been taken away from us when we were in school. And so the only reason why I can speak Spanish today is because, and value it today, is because of what my parents instilled in us.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because you grew up in a rural area and you spoke only Spanish at the house or at home. But when you were outside, say, playing with other kids in the town, did you mainly speak Spanish with them? And did you speak Spanish with your other brothers and sisters when you were young? Or how was that experience?
Well, that's complicated to explain, if you will. It depended on our age, right? When we were younger, our friends, the people that would come over and that we would play with, and even in school, because we were all learning English. So at first, when we were younger, we spoke Spanish to each other. But as we developed our language skills, our English language skills, we started to speak English. Okay, so even my younger siblings, they spoke more English at home because they started to hear more English than, say, I did and my sister that followed me, because they started hearing it from us, right? So when I was a teenager, I would speak English, mostly English to my friends, but still, as you've heard me speak to my Hispanic friends now, we speak English, but then we throw in some of our Spanish words. So we code switched between both languages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's another question or idea that just came to my mind is because kids learn languages kind of by hearing.
Right.
And so in your house growing up, pretty much all the TV and radio was in Spanish only, no English at all. So you kind of had a Spanish immersion until like age 4 or 5?
Well, okay, so we have to go back and think about the time when I was English, right? So let's not reveal that. So back then when I was younger, and the television was always in English because there's no Spanish broadcasting.
Okay.
There was no Spanish broadcasting, right? And so today, even I think about my dad, because he's the one that would listen to the TV and watch TV more. I never heard Dad speak Spanish, but he'd understand what was going on
English?
Because of the, speak English, excuse me, yes.
Okay.
But he would understand what was going on because of what's language. Language is not just words, right? It's gestures and it's movement and it's social gestures. So yeah, the Spanish we heard was from the radio. All the music that we heard was Spanish, and then the conversation between our family members.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is some other questions I'm kind of curious about because I'm learning Spanish, and your take on learning Spanish, although your experience is much different than mine, but do you feel comfortable speaking Spanish with people from all Spanish-speaking countries? Or Mexico, you're more comfortable with Mexican Spanish, or what about Cubanos or Dominicanos?
So I'm, okay, that's a good question. I'm comfortable with speaking Spanish with any Spanish-speaking person. Even in Mexico, right? If I'm speaking to someone, say, up northern Mexico, it's going to be easier for me to understand the vocabulary because it's so similar, right? as opposed to people that live in the Yucatan. There's going to be some words, vocabulary that are going to differ, right? But in terms of feeling comfortable, I feel comfortable because even if they're from Cuba or if they're from the Dominican Republic or from Peru, I'm going to understand what they're saying. There's just going to be some words that I perhaps will not. But based on the content of what we're talking about, I'll get the gist of what's happening, of what's being said. But on the other hand, we were in Mexico not too long ago, and it does embarrass me to speak Spanish with other people that are, say, from Mexico or from another country that their dominant language is Spanish, because I don't speak and read a lot of Spanish. I have to think about my words sometimes, and that is, to me, that's embarrassing. I would like to be able to speak it comfortably and fluently all the time.
Okay. And how would you say, how important is it in hearing a foreign language when you were young? Because I ask this because, in studying Spanish, we will be listening to something on the radio or TV, and I don't catch it or I don't get it. And for you, it's kind of, I understood what he said. I'm like, well, your experience, as a child, just hearing the language for those 4 or 5 years is invaluable, it seems to me, because your ear was tuned, where my ear is not really tuned. It's getting tuned. It's a slow process, but it's not tuned like, say, a child who grew up hearing the language from birth. They're just more accustomed to the sounds and the speed of the language.
Okay. So that's a great question, because I'm very passionate about that question, right? And since all my life I've taught and I have worked with children all my life, right? So, and I pay really close attention to children and what they say and how they're learning. And so I know without a doubt, and I know how a child's brain is functioning and developing as a child, right? And now that I see my grandkids, and I think, and you do too, we talk about it all the time. How did they do that? How do they speak? They can go from English to Spanish so quickly and as young as they are. Yet as I'm learning how to speak Italian, it's a challenge because I'm way older, right? So for younger children, and I was telling my son just the other day, work with the kids with those things that they're interested in now, because now that they're children, because the sooner they begin, the more their brains are capturing what they're learning, and the muscle memory is being developed at a younger age. Whereas when we're older, developing that muscle memory, our brains, it takes more time and more practice to do that.
Yeah, I know, like you see, grandkids at 2 or 3, they can switch back between English and Spanish. It's kind of embarrassing for me, because the time they can understand better than I can.
Right.
Like, how can a 2-year-old, and they understand all the words that are, well, not all the words, but a lot of the words that are being said, and maybe at a faster pace, and I'm still struggling to catch, hey, what did he say? I may have better command of the structure, the tenses, but that doesn't really mean a thing if you can't understand what people are telling you. But that's the nature of learning a new language.
So, but with that said, I wanted to also give this example. Our youngest grandson is 2. And I was so surprised the other day when I heard him speak on the phone, right, to me. I couldn't believe how well he was speaking. However, prior, when he was 1, when he was younger, he didn't speak a whole lot. He didn't say a whole lot. He would say one word phrases, 2-word phrases. Now he's speaking in complete sentences. So it's that listening. So all this time he's been listening and perfecting that vocabulary that he could finally be able to enunciate and say and utilize, the syntax correctly. So yeah, listening is very important.
Yeah. Look at it this way in red, little kids learning, when you learned your native language, you were listening to it 24/7, we say in English, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and only maybe started to be able to speak, 2, 3 years old, basic sentences. So we're trying to learn a new language. How much time? We're not hearing that language 24/7 for 3, 4, 5 years. Some people lucky, maybe you get a couple hours a week if you got to work, you have family. So don't be so hard on yourself and expect to learn the language, say, overnight or just like that. Okay, well, you did mention into my next area that you're studying Italiano, as they say. And why did you want to learn Italian?
Because I love the country. Italy is beautiful, and I was very fortunate and have been able to visit Italy twice. My son and his family lived in Italy for a few years, so I got to go and visit, and I just loved Italy, and I loved the people, and so that's why I wanted to learn how to when I was going to go visit my son, I decided, well, I need to be able to communicate with people and know what's happening. So that's when I started to learn how to speak Italian.
Yeah.
Sorry. Back then, CDs, I don't know, right
Yeah,
now, if we
CDs,
still have CDs, right? So I bought a CD and I would listen to it when I would drive to work. And then I just loved it. I loved Italy and loved the language.
Okay.
So
you think, is it easier for you to say learn Italian since you already speak Spanish? As opposed to myself trying to learn Italian?
Okay, so I've analyzed that question quite a bit, right? When I'm frustrated with the fact that I'm not learning it as quickly as I would like to, right? And I thought, it's going to be easy because it's so similar to Spanish. But although there's a lot of similarities, and in terms of listening, it helps me because I can listen, and because of the similarities, I can understand the speaking part not so much. Because there's differences in terms of how you use it, right? Like the word to go, right? In Spanish is voy, and in Italian vado. So there's similarities, but still there's differences that you need to understand.
Okay. Yeah, because I hear you have a language exchange partner in Italy, in Milan, or Milano, and it seems like you can understand pretty well,
right?
But it's the speaking part. So you think, and I guess you used to tell me when I started studying Spanish, you need to speak, and I guess didn't feel I was ready. But and I guess there's an issue of, do you have enough vocabulary to be able to speak, because you can't talk about anything if you don't have any words. But so that's kind of a big debate in language learning. Some people say speak from the jump, we say in English, or from the very beginning. Some people say no, you need to wait maybe at least 6 months. Some people say a year until you can build up a base vocabulary so you can have something to talk about. So what's your thought about that?
That's a good question. I think that everybody is different, right? And so language is more than just about speaking, right? It's not just about just saying what I know. Language is about communicating. It's about socializing, right? It's about culture. I mean, you know that. You ask me, what does that mean? Well, it's hard to explain because you have to know the culture to understand that word, right? It's about how your emotions, how do you feel about a certain thing, right? So whenever you are ready to start speaking, then you need to try. There's no set time. And not till 6 months later will I start. No. You might be ready because you're comfortable with yourself and you don't care what other people think, and start speaking right away. So the more you practice it, the more you learn, of course. But how can you practice it if you have no vocabulary at all? Right? So
that's a good point. Yeah, because I think Yeah, you're right. I guess it's different for each person. So when you feel you're ready, and I have a twin brother who's learning Japanese, but he's been studying Japanese for a long time. I don't know, 5, 6 years, but he mainly focused on reading. And so he can read Japanese pretty well, but so he has a language partner in Japan he talks to. And I was talking to him the other day. He said, yeah, it's kind of tough to have a conversation because my vocabulary is so limited. And I said, well, that's the nature of the beast, as we say in English. That's part of learning. And it just takes time, to build up your vocabulary. But it's something I guess you need to do eventually, because you only get better at speaking if you speak. Because I remember when I first started, I was real nervous. And trying to think of a word. How do I conjugate this verb and that? But you just have to go through that and experience that. Well, let's jump to your.
Excuse me.
You have a background in education. You kind of touched on that. Have you done any specific research? And maybe you touched on this too, or studies as far as how children learn a language, say maybe as opposed to how adults learn a language. Is there a difference, or?
I think there. Yes, there's a difference, right? Because let's go back to thinking about my grandson. He's 2, my youngest grandson, and you've seen it with the youngest ones, right? Because they're the ones that speak Spanish, right? When we're little and we're not learning grammar, right? We're not learning conjugation. We're just speaking. We're just using what we know and speaking it.
And one thing, little kids don't seem to care if they make a mistake.
Exactly.
We as adults, we get all embarrassed. Oh, I'm going to look foolish. I can't. But kids don't care. So they say, even if it's wrong, they just say it.
Right.
And they learn eventually.
And for adults, then that's different, because we understand now how language functions, the function of language. So we need to understand how, for example, for me, how to conjugate in Italian. How does Italian work? How does it function in order to begin to produce it? 1. Number 2 is, how comfortable do I feel speaking it? How comfortable do I feel making mistakes, right? If I don't care, then it's going to be much more easier. If I'm not embarrassed about the mistakes that I make, and I do, I get embarrassed, right? And I think, I'm so dumb that I still don't get it. If I wasn't so hard on myself, I feel that I would be able to produce it more, The other thing is how much time do I give it?
Right.
How much time do I have to give it to practice it? How invested am I in learning Italian, right? As opposed to how invested are you? We have more. We have more flexibility in going to Mexico. You hear Spanish all the time, right? I don't hear Italian here in Texas. Never have heard it here in Texas.
Work and more effort to.
Right. And when am I ever going to go to Italy and use it there? I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah.
May we go to Italy?
Sure. And I'd like to go to Italy too, and since we were over there, go to Spain and those two countries.
That would be nice.
So. Okay. So maybe to wrap this up, as a overall perspective, and the listeners are adults, what's the best way, or let me ask you a question before that. What's your thought about classroom learning or book learning? I think I've told them my impression about that, but.
And that's a tough,
any
question,
benefits at all?
That question is a good question, and it's a very debated question here. Learning a second language in the classroom from a book, right? I feel that learning a second language needs to be very natural, the way we learned when we were children, right? The communication, the speaking, the practicing, how do we really learn it? if we practice things from the book, because the book is going to tell you, I go to school, you go to school, he goes to school. That's not how we naturally speak. That's not. But we need to learn and practice in a scenario kind of way, in a very natural kind of way, in terms of how we naturally speak Spanish or speak another language. And so that's my take. Yeah, the book is a resource, but how do we practice it in order to internalize it? We have to internalize it in a very natural type of way.
Okay. All right. Is there any final piece of advice you'd like to offer to the viewers on their English language journey?
I think my advice is to continue your journey and not give up. Learning a second language or a third language or a fourth language, whatever it may be for you, I encourage you to continue that because it's very beneficial for us. We are in a global society now, so the more we understand each other, and the best way to understand each other, if we can communicate with each other, the better it is for us. And then as individuals, it's very good for our brains to be able to speak more than one language. So that's one of the other reasons why I'm learning to speak Spanish. Italian is to help me mentally, right? To strengthen my brain. So good for you if you're learning another language. You keep it up. Don't give up on yourself. We all learn differently, and it takes us all, different amount of time and practice to do so. So congratulations to your viewers.
Good point. Yeah, there's studies that say if you're learning a foreign language, it may help your brain. It may, we say, fend off or delay diseases, maybe like Alzheimer's or dementia. And I guess I've mentioned this before, but I think it's just important. A lot of you, from comments you sent me, are learning English to improve yourself, better your life situation, maybe to get a better job. And that's all good things. But I think you need to be consistent with it and, try to do something a little bit every day if you can, even if it's 15, 20 minutes. And don't compare yourself to other people.
Right.
We watch videos. Hey, I learned English in 3 months. That's not realistic. But we see these things and we think, hey, what's wrong with me? I can't learn like this guy. Must be something. We compare ourselves to other people, and we really shouldn't be doing that. We should stop doing that. You're on your journey. It's different from another person's journey, different from my journey, and you just focus on that. And this is key thing I always say, you just need to have fun. It should be fun, because if it's not fun, then you're probably not going to do it or going to want to do it. That's a kind of, we say in English like going to want to, but we say gonna wanna. You're not going to want to do it, or want to do it for long, or if you're not invested, like Rosa said, the outcome is really not going to be what you want it to be. So just have fun with it, and that's kind of what I do. And find, if you're having difficulty staying motivated, find what are you interested in your native language. Then listen to programs in English about those things that you are interested in. So those are some tips, but I think we've almost hitting 30 minutes. I think I need to wrap it up. So again, thanks for watching this episode of Learn Everyday English. And thank you for Rosa here to join me, offer some insight and experience, and I'll leave it at that. So have a good day, week, weekend, wherever you are in this world, and we'll see you later on Learn Everyday
English.
Hey, goodbye. Bye.